Sa loob ng 78 taon, ang Presidential Broadcast Service, Bureau of Broadcast Services, sa pangunguna ng Radyo Pilipinas, Radyo Publiko, ay naging boses ng bayan, kasama ng lahat ng Pilipino sa bawat yugto ng kasaysayan. Mula sa pagsahimpapawid ng aming unang estasyong DZFM sa Maynila noong 1947 hanggang sa patuloy na paglago ng 36 na himpilan ng Presidential Broadcast Service sa bansa sa kasalukuyan. Hindi matitinag ang aming misyon, maghatid ng tapat na impormasyon at makabuluhang kaalaman para sa mamamayang Pilipino. Kasabay ang patuloy na pagpapaigting ng 31 provincial radio stations ng Radyo Pilipinas, Radyo Publiko sa bansa. Patunay ng aming tuloy-tuloy na pagsisikap sa paghahatid serbisyo ang pag-angat ng Radyo Pilipinas, Radyo Publiko sa top 5 AM stations sa Metro Manila na ipinagpapasalamat namin sa inyong patuloy na pagtitiwala. Hindi lang sa balita at musika kinikilala ang ating himpilan. Mula pa noong 1986, ang RP2 Sports Radio ang tanging sports broadcast institution ng bansa. Hatid ang sports for all para sa bawat Pilipino saan mang dako ng mundo. Bukod dito, ang Radyo Magazine 1278 kHz na nagsisilbing general information station na nagsusulong ng edukasyon, kultura, turismo, kapaligiran at mga programang handog ng pamahalaan para sa sambayanan. Pinarangalan ng Commission on Filipinos Overseas ang PBS-BBS sa pangunguna ng RP World Service sa natatangin nitong kontribusyon sa paghahatid ng serbisyo at impormasyon para sa ating mga OFW at kababayang Pilipino saan mang sulok ng mundo. Mula sa Luzon hanggang sa Visayas at Mindanao, maging sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo, kasama ninyo kami. Sa gitna ng lumalawak na hamon ng digitalization, patuloy na kinikilala ang Radyo Pilipinas, Radyo Publiko bilang isa sa mga pinagkakatiwalaang tagapagpalaganap ng impormasyon. Sa digital space, halos 1.2 milyon na ang taga-subaybay ng Radyo Pilipinas, Radyo Publiko Facebook page. Sa pandaigdigang entablado, pinarangalan ang Radyo Pilipinas sa kategorya ng government streaming sa Asia Pacific Broadcasting Awards. Patunay ng aming walang sawang pagsusulong ng makabagong pamamaraan upang maipahatid ang mas mabilis, mas mahusay at mas malawak na serbisyo para sa bawat Pilipino. Kasabay nito, mas pinatatag ng Presidential Broadcast Service ang FM group nito sa paglulunsad nitong Pebrero 14, 2025 ng pangmasang FM station na nakilala bilang 87.5 Republika ni Juan, Music for Everyone. Pinasimulan din ang pangmalakasang hybrid AM-FM broadcast ng 104.3 The Capital na mula sa pinagsanib na programa ng PBS flagship station 738 kHz, Radyo Pilipinas, Radyo Publiko at 104.3 The Capital. 78 taon ng serbisyo publiko at sa mga susunod pang kabanata, asahan ninyo kaming patuloy na maghahatid ng tapat at makabuluhang serbisyo para sa sambayanang Pilipino.
Happy anniversary, PBS!
Radyo Pilipinas,
Radyo Publiko.
Front and Center. Front and Center. A focus on important and significant developments affecting the lives of Filipinos, not only in the Philippines, but also those living and working around the world. Join us in Front and Center. Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Welcome to Front and Center, where we focus on developments in the Philippines, legislation that provides policies and directions that strives to promote a better economy for the country, issues that concern the welfare and well-being of every Filipino. All of these and more will be Front and Center. You can watch this program live on our Facebook page, Radyo Pilipinas World Service, and also you can hear us live on audio streaming at Evox PBS Receiver app. So join us for another edition of Front and Center with your host, Jerome Toledo.
Front and Center. Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
On September 10th, the State Council of People's Republic of China has approved the establishment of the nature reserve in Bajo de Masinloc, or as our neighbor called it, the Wangyan Island Nature or National Nature Reserve. In its press release, the Chinese government said they will establish this nature reserve in the island to maintain the diversity, stability, and sustainability of the natural ecosystem of that said shoal. It ordered Chinese departments to strictly implement the regulations of the People's Republic of China on nature reserves, as press release stated, and other regulations on the construction and management of nature reserves, strictly fulfill their ecological and environmental protection responsibilities, strengthen organizational leadership and coordination, improve management institutions, and take note of this, and this is important, strengthen supervision and law enforcement of all illegal and irregular activities involving nature reserves, ensuring the implementation of various management measures, and continuously improving the construction and management of national nature reserves. Meanwhile, our Department of Foreign Affairs reiterated that Bajo de Masinloc is a long-standing and integral part of the Philippines and has sovereignty and jurisdictions over that island. And the Philippines likewise has the exclusive authority to establish environmental protection areas over its territory and relevant maritime zones. And with this, the DFA will file a formal diplomatic protest against the illegitimate and unlawful action by China, as it clearly infringes upon the rights and interests of the Philippines in accordance with the international law. So why is this move coming from the Chinese government matters? So let's have a discussion with this with our foreign policy expert and security analyst, none other than Professor Rene De Castro. Good morning, Professor Rene. This is Jerome Toledo again here on Front and Center on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Good morning.
Good morning, Jerome. How are you doing? And of course, good morning to our listeners.
Yeah, I'm doing good, but this development is not so good because obviously China has again violated the 2016 Permanent Court of Arbitration ruling that invalidate their claim in the South China Sea. Yet they're establishing this nature reserve in the Scarborough Shoal or in Bajo de Masinloc. Although that proposal, Prof. Rene, the proposal itself is not provocative, and also civilian in nature, but still it undermines the sovereignty through non-military means. So why is this latest move from China important for us?
Well, it is in a way, it's oozing with what I call the traditional approach to statecraft. Basically how you impose your power on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So it's marked by what I call the use of contradictions. Everyone, I guess, is familiar with the Bakwa, where you see the unity of contradictions or diversity. On the one hand, as you mentioned, a nature reserve seems to be so benign. So it's basically as telling you, I want to preserve the environment. Who could basically go against this?
Yeah.
Given the fact, of course, that since China took control of Scarborough Shoal of Bajo de Masinloc, there's always been a concern that China would create an artificial island, then eventually transform this artificial island into a militarized land feature, what China's done with 7 of the land features in the South China Sea or the Spratlys. So on the one hand, it presents itself as doing humanity a favor, but on the other hand, we know for a fact it's Chinese exercise of territoriality.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Chinese approach to basically impose its territorial control over Scarborough Shoal or Bajo de Masinloc. We have to remember what China did earlier this year, that China declared Bajo de Masinloc or Scarborough Shoal as its baseline. Again, China is telling the world, I'm conforming with the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, I'm coming out with a baseline. A baseline should be, of course, located to the coast, and everyone knows for a fact Scarborough Shoal is about 700 or 800 nautical miles away from the nearest Chinese island of Hainan.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, since China declares that Bajo de Masinloc would be its baseline, So China could exercise a 200 nautical miles starting, of course, from its baseline, which is, of course, a semi-submerged land feature, Bao de Masinloc. Again, this oozing with, Chinese approach to statecraft. On the one hand, it looks so benign. It looks that it serves humanity's interests. But on the other hand, of course, it's a smack of Chinese effort to control the South China Sea through deceptive, aggressive, and coercive action.
So meaning to say, Professor Rene, so this is a smokescreen, and at the same time, a disguise.
Oh, yeah. Well, again, I won't use the term disguise because this is really the Chinese approach. The use of deception, going back to the classic work of Sun Tzu, Art of War. When you're up here, make it appear you're far. When you're far, make it appear you're near. So you deceive. Basically, use of deception, which is, of course, natural or a given in Chinese statecraft and, of course, even warfare.
Okay, so I read somewhere, Professor Rene, that China also employs a salami slicing strategy. So that means that they are achieving. They would like to achieve greater victory through a series of smaller actions. So do you think this action that China is conducting or doing right now is a part of that strategy?
Yes, of course. Slowly. That's why it appears so benign. It appears that who could basically challenge anyone who's want to preserve the environment. But at the same time, of course, it's an incremental step to consolidate its control over a disputed territory which China declares to be its baseline.
I see. Okay, but again, is this the first time that China will employ this method, or have they?
Well, China
done
has
this?
employed it ever since, of course, China took control of Scarborough Shoal in June 2012. If I have to remind our people how China took control of Scarborough Shoal in 2012. Going back then, there was supposed to be a deal between, of course, the administration of the late President Benigno Aquino III and, of course, the Chinese. That was supposed to be, again, going back, I'm supposed to present the paper of what happened in Scarborough Shoal in a conference late this month. So supposed to be been a deal that has been, of course, negotiated in Washington, D.C. by a well-known American diplomat who was then, of course, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for East Asian Pacific Affairs during that time. And, of course, the agreement was a mutual withdrawal of Chinese and Philippine civilian vessels who had been facing each other since, of course, April 2012 when the Scarborough standoff happened. The Chinese asked us to withdraw our lone Coast Guard vessel supported by a BIFAR vessel. We complied with that agreement. China withdrew its civilian vessels, but later on, they sent another civilian vessel from Hainan Island and took control of Scarborough Shoal by putting, of course, a chain, preventing our Coast Guard, preventing Filipino fishermen from going back to the lagoon. So again, we see this incremental but nevertheless deceptive action of China. And we see it again right in front of our very eyes. The use of active deception.
Right. Okay. But of course, this method, they will be using this now slowly. But will China still use its force by ramming our boats?
Well, they did it, and see what happened when you have that incident last month, August 11. They really intended to ram our, put the BRP Suluan between a Chinese Coast Guard and, of course, the first time that China used a what they call a gray ship, the People's Liberation Army's Navy destroyer. But see what happened. It ended up tragically, unfortunately, for the Chinese.
Okay, so having said that, so since this method will Chinese use, would this complicate further our relations with Beijing?
Well, it's already complicated. Expect it to be complicated
begin
for a
with.
long period of time until, of course, either China takes control of 90% of the South China Sea, or we're simply subjugated by the Chinese. So expect it to be abnormal. But again, this is a reality that future generation of Filipinos we're facing an aggressive, expansionist, and coercive power right and in our neighborhood. Interestingly, I don't know if you've seen the parade that was conducted in Beijing last September 3, when China was, of course, again, you see this paradox in Chinese approach. China was talking about peace, about the end of the Second World War, Pacific War, yet China is showing its military might, basically giving countries around the region a choice. You know, either you go for peace, which means you accept Chinese subjugation, or war if we challenge China's expansionist goal in the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea, and of course over northern Luzon, which is of course Taiwan.
Okay, but some countries are siding with China by sending their representatives there, or their head of state. But
Well, China have all the resources, and who would like to basically say no to the great banquet that President Xi Jinping hosted after the parade?
Okay. So having said that, so what's gonna be the response of other claimants in the region who happens to be ASEAN member states like Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia on this environmental claim by China?
Well, at least the Philippines, the Marcos administration had shown to the world and to our people, we will not be deceived by this Chinese action. We see what's behind this seemingly benign and benign and seemingly very generous effort by China to
And humanitarian.
ensure that Bao Masinloc remains nature's reserve. We saw it. What's behind China's intention, and good enough. The Department of Foreign Affairs had indicated that we will not accept. We will file a diplomatic protest.
But they will file a formal diplomatic protest. But throughout the years, with this issue, DFA has filed countless numbers of diplomatic protests. So, are they sufficient enough, Professor Rene?
They are necessary. They're necessary because we want to basically tell China and the world we don't accept the situation, but it's not sufficient. To make it sufficient, we have to back that diplomatic protest with naval power.
Yeah. Okay.
Which, of course, the Marcos administration is developing right now with the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept.
And that's
Now, I agree with you. It's not sufficient, but it's necessary. To make it sufficient, it should be backed with naval power.
Yes, that's right. And that's what I'm going to ask Professor Rene. But our country should step up or ramp up our defense capabilities by, you mentioned, establishing our naval defense.
Yeah, but we need a lot of money. We need to really invest a lot of money. That's why we should go after corrupt government officials and contractors who have wasted the people's money in those fake flood control projects. We're depriving our national, our armed forces, our ordinary Marines, the sailors who are, Coast Guard personnel who are manning the port for us, of resources that could have been used to strengthen the capabilities of the armed forces of the Philippines. Yet they're ending up in the pockets of corrupt politicians, corrupt government officials, and of course contractors. So we have to make them accountable for what they're doing, not only against the Filipino people, but of course depriving our country the capability that would ensure the survival of the Filipino nation way into the 21st century.
Okay, so we'll have a separate question regarding that. But anyway, so let's see. So, by the way, I'm going to ask that rather, Professor Rene. So, do you think there should be a realignment of budget from flood projects to defense?
Yes, but we have to, number one, Secretary Teodoro, Gilberto Teodoro said that's probably time that we rethink how we basically allocate resources for defense. Because the major challenge regarding, of course, the allocation of resources for defense is that according to our constitution, it should always be education, which is not bad. So every time we have to increase our defense budget, we also have to increase the resources for education, which is only proper. We have to educate, train future generations of Filipinos, not only to ensure our survival, but also to ensure the prosperity of the Filipino nation. But how can we get those resources unless, of course, we prevent that leak in the dam, which is, of course, corruption?
Okay, okay, but Professor Rene, I have to ask this because there is a news circulating that a Department of Education will now include uh, discussion on the West Philippine Sea, and they will include it in the curriculum. What's your reaction on this?
It's good, but my advice is let's have a subject, and because it's self-serving. As a full-time academic in De La Salle University and also a classroom teacher, we should have a subject on Philippine geopolitics. So we have to explain to our people what do we basically mean by territory, territoriality, great power competitions, because we are in the midst of great power competition. And why is it important that, and of course, more importantly, we have to impress to our people the notion of an archipelagic nation. We have to develop our archipelagic defense capabilities.
And also,
So it's not just talking simply of the Philippines as an archipelago, the Filipino nation as a maritime nation, but emphasizing the fact that as an archipelago, we have to develop capabilities which is unique. Because there are only two primarily archipelagos in the world, Indonesia and the Philippines.
yeah.
So our defense requirement is unique. It's expensive, but it's necessary to ensure that the Philippines as an archipelagic state will thrive and, of course, survive way into the 21st century, where, of course, we're facing a very aggressive, coercive, and expansionist neighbor in our north who wants to basically deprive us of our exclusive economic zone in the South China Sea and West Philippine Sea. So that should also include not only pressing upon our people that we are a maritime state. The Filipino is Philippines is an archipelagic state.
Right.
The Filipino nation is a maritime nation, and we have to develop the necessary military capabilities, specifically naval capabilities, to ensure that we could defend this archipelago.
And also, we can make an appeal to our lawmakers regarding the supporting in the support of education and defense, particularly in the context of the West Philippine Sea issue. So we have to call our lawmakers then, Professor Rene, that we must support this initiative.
Not only call, but more importantly, make them accountable. If they have committed corruption, they should be held liable for what they did against the Filipino nation, against the armed forces of the Philippines, and against future generation of Filipinos who we need to ensure their survival as a maritime nation in an archipelagic state. Make them accountable, or some who have committed I think the worst crime in public service, depriving ordinary people, education, defense, whatever, health, of the necessary budget. Make them accountable.
Okay. So, very well said, Professor Rene. But I'm going to return to the discussion on salami slicing strategy. Yeah. Do you think this is the way China will do in the next few years? And are we expecting something vague?
I'm looking at it in terms of, I don't know if you're familiar with Mao Zedong's People's War, where you see warfare in terms of stages. So number one, you have what you call strategic defensive, which apply guerrilla tactics, low intensity. Then you go to what you call strategic stalemate, where you try to achieve parity with the other side. But of course, in the third stage will be full offensive, strategic offensive. So China probably is using salami tactic, cognitive warfare, gray zone operation as a means to soften up the will of countries that are opposing China. But of course, I'm not discounting the fact that once it reaches the third stage, which is for strategic offensive, China would use kinetic force. Please take note, China has the largest navy in the world at this point in time.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, one last point before I let you go, Professor Rene. So, on Thursday, the reciprocal access agreement between Philippines and Japan has already take effect. So what's going to be the how do we benefit from this?
Japan, of course, is been historically a maritime power. Ever since, of course, Japan developed its navy during the Meiji period in the 19th century. Japan is the first Asian country that defeated a European power during the Russo-Japanese War.
That's right.
Naval power. Of course, what happened during the Second World War was very tragic, regrettable. But interestingly, Japan had shown remorse. Japan has rehabilitated itself. Japan is a constructive stakeholder, country here in the region, despite its, of course, its history. It's having, of course, a very modern and very modern and highly technologically advanced economy, and of course a navy, or they don't want to call it a navy, they call it the Maritime Self-Defense Force.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, a power to reckon with. That's the best way, basically. Japan, along with Taiwan, is actually our two natural partners, ensuring maritime security in the waters of the first island chain. The notion of the first island chain: Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines. Our destiny are, of course, linked by geography, history, and, of course, the fact that the three countries, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, are liberal democratic states. Taiwan and Japan are, of course, credible maritime power. They could help us develop our own maritime capabilities.
Okay. All right. Okay. So just a follow-up question. One more question, Prof. Rene. Apologies. Okay. So since we are talking about the National Nature Reserve that China is planning to build in our exclusive or in our sovereignty, should the Department of Environment and Natural Resources step into this issue?
No, it's the job of the Department of Foreign Affairs. And of course, the Department of National Defense.
Okay. All right. That's well said. Okay. So thank you so much, Professor Renato De Castro, the foreign policy expert. And that's from De La Salle University. Thank you for joining us in the program.
Thank you very much. And again, good morning to all our listeners.
Okay.
Have a great day and have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Okay, so that was Professor Renato De Castro, the foreign policy expert and security analyst from De La Salle University. And in the meantime, Front and Center will be right back after these short messages. You're listening to Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Sa loob ng 78 taon, ang Presidential Broadcast Service, Bureau of Broadcast Services, sa pangunguna ng Radyo Pilipinas, Radyo Publiko, ay naging boses ng bayan, kasama ng lahat ng Pilipino sa bawat yugto ng kasaysayan. Mula sa pagsahimpapawid ng aming unang estasyong DZFM sa Maynila noong 1947 hanggang sa patuloy na paglago ng 36 na himpilan ng Presidential Broadcast Service sa bansa sa kasalukuyan. Hindi matitinag ang aming misyon, maghatid ng tapat na impormasyon at makabuluhang kaalaman para sa mamamayang Pilipino. 78 taon ng serbisyo publiko at sa mga susunod pang kabanata, asahan ninyo kaming patuloy na maghahatid ng tapat at makabuluhang serbisyo para sa sambayanang Pilipino.
Radyo Pilipinas, Radyo Publiko.
Front and Center. Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Welcome back to Front and Center here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service with me, Jerome Toledo. So now we're heading to remaining minutes of our program, but we'd like to again discuss the reciprocal access agreement because this between Philippines and Japan, because this RAA has entered into force on Thursday, highlighting the robust strategic partnership between the two countries. So that's what the Department of National Defense has said. So the DND said that the entry into force of the Reciprocal Access Agreement, or RAA, between Manila and Japan carries forward the robust strategic partnership, validating the strength or validating the strength of people-to-people ties, shared values and international principles, and common purpose for the security and stability of the region, rather. And the RAA facilitates greater military cooperation between the two nations by streamlining procedures for the deployment of forces in each other's territories for joint training and disaster response operations. So this RAA alone is exclusive for joint training between Japanese and Filipino forces, and as well as addressing disaster response operation. And the DND has said that they are grateful for the leadership of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the Philippine Senate, and also the Japanese government for their unequivocal support as it laid foundation for closer collaboration between two forces, namely the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Japan Self-Defense Forces. And the RAA reiterated, or the DND rather, reiterated that the RAA will support its efforts to provide the much needed leverage for the advancement of the Philippines' national interests. And the agreement was signed in Manila last year, particularly in July 8th. That was ratified by the President Marcos Jr. on November 5th and by the Senate on December 16 of last year. And it was approved by the Japanese parliamentary, or the Japanese Diet, on June 6, 2025. So basically, this RAA will only it is similar to VFA, or Visiting Forces Agreement, with our United States military counterparts, and that VFA and the RAA will offer of joint military exercises, and as well as training for disaster response operations. So, and more allies are collaborating with our Philippine military and Philippine security forces that's for a greater military cooperation, so between the two nations. So that's a good thing that we have allies that is cooperating and collaborating with our Philippine forces. And with that statement from the DND, we now end this edition of Front and Center here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service, together with our production team and technical personnel. This is your host, Jerome Toledo. Until next time, mabuhay.
You have just heard and watched Front and Center. Front and Center. Join us again for another edition here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Front and Center.